Distinguished guests, may I have your attention, please? We will soon begin our first special session. For those of you who are still outside, we kindly ask for you to please enter the hall and take your seats. We will still wait for some of our guests to arrive, so please come inside the hall and take your seats. Thank you very much. And for our panel discussants, if you have arrived already, please come up to the stage so that we can check your microphone and see that everything is ready. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, if you are still outside, we kindly ask for you to enter the hall and take your seats. We will begin session 1 in just a few minutes. Thank you very much. And while we are waiting, I would like to inform you of the interpretation channels. For the special session, we provide a simultaneous interpretation for Korean and English. So please use the receivers placed on your tables and turn to channel 1 for English and channel 2 for Korean. That's channel 1 for English and channel 2 for Korean. We will just give maybe 1 or 2 minutes for some of our guests to arrive. As you have seen, there is a long line outside. So just 1 or 2 minutes and we will begin our special session. Thank you for your patience. And for those of you who are still waiting, we do have some surveys available for the betterment of the conference in the further years. So if you have a little bit of time at the moment, then please feel free to fill out the survey and submit it at your convenience once you are done. So please fill out the survey and provide us with some of the details and feedback for us later on. Thank you very much. So, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. I believe that we now have some guests in the room that were waiting in line. Let us begin our special session number 1. So, our special session number 1 will be held under the theme of International Cooperation, Improving the PKO Environment. And we have a wide range of panelists here today to improve our discussions. And to lead us on, we have the Honorable Ms. Enna Park, the former Korean ambassador to the United Kingdom. So, Ms. Chair, the floor is yours. Please turn on your microphone as you use it. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everyone, distinguished panelists and participants. Thank you very much for joining today's session, special session on improving on international cooperation and improving the PKO environment. Let me briefly introduce our distinguished panelists. To my left, Mr. Kofi Amankwa-Manu, Deputy Minister of Defense, Ghana. And next, Mr. Jacob Oboth, Minister of State, Defense and Veteran Affairs, Uganda. Then over there, Mr. Brendan Howe, Dean and Professor, Graduate School of International Studies, Ewha Women's University. Then Mr. Andrew Hyde, Senior Fellow and Director, Transforming Conflict and Governance Program, the Stimson Center, United States. Then the last panelist, Professor Ho-Gyong Kang, Professor, International Peace Operations Center, Korea National Defense University. Thank you for joining. Well, before opening the floor for the panelists, let me recall the PKO ministerial meeting, which was held in Seoul last year. I remember defense ministers and foreign ministers and high-level officials from more than 80 governments and representative of international organizations gathered virtually to discuss and generate the capabilities of UN peacekeeping and support their capacity building, with a specific focus on technology and partnership, as well as enhancing the role of women in PKO. Why does the PKO environment matter? The operating environment for PKO are increasingly complex, constantly shifting, and sometimes high risk. So the rise of new unconventional threats like climate change, pandemics, cyber, drones, and polarization among nations as well as within a society. These new unconventional threats result in not only a surge in place of need, but also the need to respond in a more effective and efficient way. And it also requires a strong commitment to leveraging the technological tools, women participation, as well as strategy partnership. At the ministerial last year, Korea announced the Seoul Initiative in partnership with the United UN Secretariat, highlighting its leading role, among others, in supporting an agile, data-driven, and technology-enabled peacekeeping. It also held a Smart Camp model exhibition for UN PKO. The participants of the ministerial shared the importance of peacekeeping technology capacity building and the need for long-term sustainable partnership based on the needs and priorities of troop and police sending contributing countries was highlighted. They also discussed the progress and setbacks and women participation in peacekeeping, emphasizing the importance of creating an enabling environment for women within the missions. Against this backdrop, our session will focus on 3 topics. First, reviewing technological challenges to establishing eco-friendly smart camps using advanced technologies. And second, sharing possible options to encourage more active participation of female UN peacekeepers. And last, discussing ways to build bilateral partnership between the UN, the ROK, and providing countries, including expanding capacity building program, training program, and also to promote the mission execution capabilities of peacekeepers. Now, I kindly ask our panelists to address mainly to these 3 topics in your presentations. I will allocate around 5-6 minutes per panelist to make presentation covering these 3 topics. Mr. Kopi Amangkwa Manu, you are the first.
Thank you very much. First of all, I'd like to say a very big thank you for the warm reception accorded me here in beautiful Seoul. I am grateful. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is a great pleasure to honor this invitation and be given the opportunity to address you during this special session of the 11th edition of the Seoul Defense Dialogue 2022, focused on the sub-theme International Cooperation and Improving the Peacekeeping Operations Environment. Promoting a balanced world order with people as its center of gravity and enhancing global peace and security have and will continue to be high on the agenda of global discourse, as outlined in the agenda of this defense dialogue. Partnering for security has therefore become an integral need in response to the complexities and the interrelatedness of both old and new defense and security threats. Partnerships have long been at the heart of peacekeeping. Therefore, this afternoon's focused dialogue around international cooperation in improving the peacekeeping operations environment is a firm recognition of the need for a strong and united approach to saving and changing the lives of the communities we serve. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the efficient employment of a limited number of forces, budget, and resources give impetus to increased use of innovative technology in a UN smart supercamp concept. A human-centric approach needs to be employed from the start. To mitigate challenges, a secured system of data collection and storage and anonymizing data will prevent privacy issues, hacking, and misuse from arising. Containing connectivity challenges arising from Internet of Things devices needing to connect and work in unison, and the expected increase in demand over time can also pose challenges. These inherent technological challenges mean the UN's drive to deploy and utilize innovative technology as an enabler to the effective response to threats occurring in the domain of peacekeeping operations environment must continue to receive support from member states. It is equally expected that the outcomes of the ongoing UN Field Remote Infrastructure Management Frame Project, that is FRAME, the Remote Infrastructure Management Frame Project, inform optimizations and needed resource management for UN smart camps, particularly in locations where fuel, energy, and water are scarce. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, during the UN Peacekeeping Ministerial Meeting 2021, Ghana and a host of countries pledged military and police capabilities to the Peacekeeping Capability Readiness System, that is the PCRs. The UN, Ghana, an interested partner, can establish a trilateral partnership to contribute to capacity building for peacekeeping operations. The Women, Peace and Security Institute, WAPSI, of the Kofi Annan International Peacekeeping Training Center in Ghana, a knowledge center for expanding technical capacity, training and policy research analysis on women, peace and security can be leveraged to better inform the broader peace and security agenda of UN peace support operations. The UN Security Council has adopted 7 resolutions on women, peace and security. For Ghana, more women occupying key decision-making roles mean more effective peacekeeping. Women peacekeepers have improved overall peacekeeping performance. After continuously mainstreaming gender parity in some specialized field is also receiving considerable attention. This has seen the appointment of trained gender advisors at all military levels, including for contingents deployed into peacekeeping operations. Ghana ranks very high among countries with female participation in PKOs. This is sustained through the concept of deploying female engagement teams backed by infrastructure for exclusive female use. To support female presence in PKO, Ghanaian contingents adopt home leave policies that consider childcare support for females leaving young children behind. Another approach has been the training and fielding of female leaders in field missions. Currently, a Ghanaian female general is the acting force commander for United Nations Disengagement Observer Force, UNDOF, with another 7 as the deputy force commander in United Nations mission for the referendum in Western Sahara. Within the framework of females contributing to global peace and security, Ghana has demonstrated strong commitment with high returns and remains available to partner with other nations toward effective implementation of United Nations Security Council resolutions on women, peace, and security. I say this with a firm belief that focused mutual and collaborative efforts, both bilateral and multilateral, have a very high propensity to yield the needed result. It is also my hope and wish that the key objectives of this dialogue will collectively be achieved. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you once again for the opportunity to address you and for your attention this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Kofi Amanka Manu. I'm afraid I didn't introduce you properly. Mr. Amanka Manu, he is currently a member of the parliament, and he is a lawyer and a member of Ghana Bar Association. He is also a member of Foreign Affairs and Regional Integration Board of the Parliament. So, thank you very much. Your excellent presentation. Now, Mr. Jacob Obos, Minister of State, Ministry of Defense and Veteran Affairs. He is a lawyer, intellectual property expert, and politician. And he is elected member of the parliament, and he also worked with the Ministry of Justice and the Constitutional Affairs as state attorney people. Now, floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator. The Honorable Ministers and Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. I'm equally very happy to attend the 2022 Seoul Defense Dialogue today under the theme, How to Address Complex Security Challenges, Fostering International Solidarity. First of all, permit me, I would like to offer my warm greetings to all distinguished guests, subject matter experts, and scholars present here today. The Seoul Defense Dialogue is a very important forum which brings together leaders and participants from across the world to discuss important issues that affect world peace and security. In-depth discussions and exchange of views over the selected topics will go a long way to offer perspectives, new perspectives, approaches, and make new contributions to world peace and security. I'm greatly honored, therefore, to present this to this distinguished audience on the topic, international cooperation in improving the peacekeeping operation, PKO, environment. Ladies and gentlemen, recent studies show that United Nations peacekeeping operations save lives and often offer better solutions to world peace and security than other multinational stabilization missions. At the same time, it is widely understood, both inside and outside the United Nations, that peacekeeping operations needs international cooperation. Every day, United Nations peacekeepers work to protect millions of vulnerable people in the world's most fragile political contexts and increasingly dangerous places. From protecting civilians in war-torn areas and building social cohesion to ensuring the safe delivery of humanitarian aid, rebuilding infrastructure, and providing livelihood skills to impoverished communities. Peacekeepers work with local and international partners to help create conditions for political solutions and sustainable peace and development. International cooperation, therefore, is at its best for improving peacekeeping operation environment. Today, the world is experiencing very deep and complex changes. The trend towards economic globalization are gaining momentum. Members of the international community are more interconnected and interdependent. On the other hand, international peacekeeping is also facing increasingly complex and diverse security challenges. Regional hotspot issues keep cropping up. Terrorism is rampant. Non-proliferation still faces grave challenges. All of this has changed the international landscape profoundly and exerted far-reaching impact on the conduct of peacekeepers. International cooperation is therefore very critical in improving peacekeeping environment through offering critical enablers, which is intelligence expertise, tactical air transport, medical services, among others, and working with the large troop contributors to enhance the capacity and capability of peacekeepers in these areas. Distinguished guests, developing guidance materials, technological tools, and additional training for troop contributors, e.g. on medical support, prevention of sexual abuse, and data analysis is one of the areas that, as we talk here today, we need to look at. In a situation that a natural disaster occurs, advancing climate action, supporting national responses to pandemic, such as COVID, supporting local livelihood, building national capacity to maintain peace and security, and supporting women and youth in building sustainable peace. The United Nations faces financial difficulties in the field of peacekeeping operations that have been rapidly expanding. In order to support the United Nations for satisfactory execution of its peacekeeping operations, funds have to be contributed to support the peacekeepers, and this can only be possible through international cooperation, thus improving PKO environment. Noting that the UN peacekeeping is a remarkable enterprise of multilateralism and international solidarity, action by the Secretariat alone is not enough to meet the challenges in the peacekeeping environment. International cooperation for peace has become more important than ever before for solving conflicts and ensuring permanent settlements. International cooperation will help in mobilizing greater support for political solutions, refocusing peacekeeping with realistic expectations and making peacekeeping operations stronger and safer. We must therefore seek peace and security on the basis of cooperation to improve the peacekeeping operations environment. Madam Moderator, Your Excellency, I need to give a little bit about Uganda from practical experience. Since independence, Uganda has gotten involved in regional and international peacekeeping on two occasions, one in 1990 to 1994 in Liberia, and in Somalia from 2007 to date. The mandate of the UN mission, United Nations mission in Liberia, was largely that Uganda participated was to disarm the warring factions in Liberia and pave way for free and fair democratic elections. Likewise, in the South Somalia, under resolution, United Nations Security Council resolution number 2372 of 2017, AMSON, which is now renamed as Artemis, is mandated to pursue the following strategic objectives: enable the gradual handing over of security responsibilities from AMSON to the Somalis; 2, reduce the threats posed by Al-Shabaab and other armed opposition groups; 3, assist the Somali community security forces to provide security for, as well as stabilization, reconciliation, and peace building in Somalia. Your Excellencies who are present here today, Uganda is known to host the UN Regional Service Center at Entebbe, and also a Peace Operation Support Hub at Entebbe, which provides logistics and administrative support to the UN mission in Africa. Right now, Uganda is one of the leading troops contributor to the AMSON and was the first country to deploy troops to Somalia as part of the AMSON in 2007 with over 6,000 troops, mostly in Sector 1 in Mogadishu. And Uganda also sent some troops to Central African Republic in support of troops from Central African Republic and DRC and South Sudan as part of the regional task force, targeting Lord's Resistance Army before the mission closed in 2017. I want to, for now, again, restate our appreciation and gratefulness for this opportunity to share with you this platform, not only the Ugandan experience, but also to learn from you. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you, Minister Obost, for sharing his insights and Uganda experience. And now I'd like to invite Mr. Brandon Ha, Professor, Yihua Human University. And Mr. Ha is, he serves as the president of Asian Political and International Studies Association, director of the Institute for International and Area Studies. And he is also editor-in-chief of the Asian International Studies Review, and he's on the editorial board of Journal of International Peacekeeping. So Professor Ha, can you give your presentation for us?
Thank you very much, Ambassador Park. And it's a great pleasure and honor to be here. So thank you very much to the organizers for inviting me to take part in these important discussions. UN PKOs have seen a steady expansion in terms of impact, legal and normative competence, technical requirements, and obligations. Technical issues have focused on the challenges of deployment, infrastructure, equipment, and the footprint of UN PKOs, but also upon the opportunities afforded by new technology and new understandings of obligations. In Korea, we've seen something of a paying back syndrome as a result of the help that Korea has received historically during and after the Korean War, as a result of which not only has there been a steady increase in Korean contributions in terms of both personnel and financing, but also in terms of leadership and training, drawing on the country's acknowledged strengths in technology and training. Korea initially proposed the concept of a UN Smart Camp in 2017, based on the country's smart city development experience to integrate geospatial, information and communication technologies and various physical devices and sensors connected to the Internet of Things. At the UN, the Department of Operational Support looks to build smart camps on the Unite FRIM Foundation to increase sustainability and operability of UN bases using this smart city technology. So the UN mission in South Sudan and the UN Interim Security Force for Abyei, which is contested between the Republic of Sudan and the Republic of South Sudan, have been mooted as possible pilot smart camp programs. At the 2021 UN Peacekeeping Ministerial in Seoul, the Korean government made 6 pledges to improve peacekeeping: running a pilot project on UN smart camps, deploying a medical support team to South Sudan, offering engineering and demining training courses, providing helicopter assets, organizing and offering female officer training courses, and deploying additional police forces. So a lot of promise coming from Seoul. The problems in establishing smart camps include the disruption of supply chains due to COVID, but also a lack of commitment by the chief proponents. For instance, despite all the promises, Korea does not contribute to UNICEF and is one of the smaller contributors to UN MISS. So one way to materialize smart camps is to emphasize how instigating and supporting them supports 3 iterations of middle powermanship. First, the niche diplomatic clout in playing to the strengths of emerging high-tech middle powers, especially those in Asia, so a hierarchical middle powermanship. Second, the humanitarian mission typically attributed to middle powers, behavioral middle powermanship. And third, cooperation between like-minded entities, multilateral middle powermanship. So basically a form of disruptive innovation from newly emerging powers with responsibility and capacity to shake things up. In terms of women peacekeeping, more women in peacekeeping means more effective peacekeeping. Women peacekeepers improve overall peacekeeping performance, have greater access to communities, help in promoting human rights and the protection of civilians, and encourage women to become a meaningful part of peace and political processes. So the fact that we can demonstrate these improvements also demonstrates at least a degree of success in this field. At the ministerial, the majority of countries pledged to increase the number of uniformed women peacekeepers they deploy. Cambodia, Malaysia, and Korea offered benchmarks for increasing their respective contributions of women's uniformed participation. Rwanda and Ethiopia committed to training on WPS for partners in their region. 9 countries committed to hosting national and regional training on topics related to WPS, and 4 countries offered financial support to Canada's ELSI initiative. But only 2 countries, Norway and Tunisia, pledged engagement platoons, and neither explicitly committed to ensuring it maintained a 50-50 gender balance as requested by DPO. No military gender advisors were pledged, although there was a gender advisor course. only a few pledges maintain gender broadly beyond the WPS agenda, and many of these focus narrowly on gender-based violence. Overall, progress is still exceedingly slow, with women representing just over 4% of the military and 10% of the police in peacekeeping missions. Bangladesh, Canada, Finland, Germany, Ireland, Italy, Norway, South Africa, and the United Kingdom have championed implementation of A4P's WPS commitment, but not Korea. Challenges include lack of country-specific data, that major contributors are already behind on existing benchmarks, and so may be unwilling to commit a marginalization into gendered roles if the focus is on added value. Again, the way forward is for newly emerging actors to take the lead through disruptive innovation and utilizing their comparative advantages. Korea lags behind and scores low on most international indices of gender equality and empowerment. Just as with technology, however, Korea potentially has a major competitive advantage in terms of women's education and training. I work at the world's largest women's university, and it's one of a number of superb educational institutions focused on women's education, training, and empowerment in Korea. And I believe it's in Korea's interest to leverage this advantage further. And this spills over to the third question we were asked to consider, trilateral partnerships between the UN, Korea, and providing countries. I think I've already alluded to this in my previous answers. Just as there's a remarkable consensus across the political divide in Korea on the importance of peacekeeping operations, there's also a consensus surrounding Korea's role as a middle power, that the country needs to get more bang for its buck, or won, in terms of niche diplomacy. Korea's strengths complement those of providing countries and the needs of the UN. What's needed is greater political will and awareness to leverage these comparative advantages, as well as a willingness to cooperate better with international and non-aligned forums, rather than a focus on geostrategic alignment with the United States. So I think that covers the questions that we've been asked to consider. So thank you.
Thank you, Professor Ho. You reminded us the 6 pledges that the Korean government made at the ministerial last year. So now I invite Mr. Andrew Hyde, Senior Fellow and Director, Transforming Conflict and Governance Program, the Stimson Center, based in Washington, D.C., I think. And he is actually a former diplomat. And he has a 30-year long career as a U.S. Foreign Service officer. And during his diplomatic tenure, he served as the interim NATO Deputy Senior Civilian Representative in Kabul. And he was head of the alliance relations at the State Department Office of Korean Affairs. Then he has also worked in the U.S. Congress, both the House and the Senate. So we are expecting to hear your presentation.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Park, for hosting this session, for the organization you brought to it, and thanks very much for the audience for being here. Really, really glad to see all of you. The Stimson Center, which I currently represent, is a Washington-based think tank that promotes international security, shared prosperity, and justice through applied research and independent analysis, deep engagement, and policy innovation. So just as you heard about my career, in a sense, this is a classic inside the Beltway, as we say, a Washington institution where we really work very closely with US government institutions, but also multilateral institutions. Stimson's been around for about 30 years. It's pioneered practical new steps towards stability and security in an uncertain world, and it's building solutions to promote international security, prosperity, and justice. So those are our sort of overall big goals. But as you heard, I'm with the Transforming Conflict and Governance program, and a big part of our research does involve, in fact, multilateral institutions and multilateral diplomacy. And nowhere is this more important than peace and security. So today's topic of international cooperation, support of peacekeeping and peace operations is really very timely and relevant. One area where we focused our efforts has been looking at how UN peace operations, which are obviously in some of the most politically fragile areas in the world, source their substantial energy requirements. And this is something that always is a little surprising, I think, to people that we focus on the energy part. But it really is fascinating, and it's something I've come to appreciate, that conventional energy sourcing, which is usually diesel generators, increases the cost dramatically of UN peace operations. It damages the environment in precisely the places where the environment can take the least damage, and it can lead to greater instability. And so replacing that with renewable energy, mainly solar, that's been our most of our focus, can mitigate those effects, and if designed properly, can contribute to sustainable economic development in the surrounding communities of the peace operations. Our research, known as Powering Peace, has over the past few years established these ideas, I think, more broadly within the UN and with key stakeholders. Now we're seeking ways and means to implement them at the needed scale, because we're talking about substantial amounts of energy, and as we know, renewable energy at scale is a particular challenge. One significant way is to develop public-private partnerships between the UN as an anchor power consumer and international and local private sector players in financing and developing these energy resources. So let's turn to a couple of the topics, the guiding questions we were given for this session. Smart camps. I came across this concept earlier this year when I was also here in Seoul, and have had a chance to talk to a number of people in New York and at the UN. And I think it's a really innovative and valuable idea. Realizing the vision of the Smart Camp has the potential, I think, to reduce costs and waste at UN peace operations and ensure their maximum impact, as my fellow panelists have already pointed out. And I think it's really a recognition, probably overdue recognition, of the profound potential of technology to improve the impact of peace operations. One aspect which I think is a little overlooked in the smart camp concept is really how it could be used to manage renewable energy production and consumption across the camp and even with surrounding communities. And the surrounding community piece is really critically important to spread the benefits. And the smart camp capabilities could be a major advantage to the initiative. Bringing the energy piece or the energy management piece to the initiative, I think could greatly enhance its potential. It would contribute to optimizing production, storage, and consumption of power and improving the potential of peacekeeping. But as my colleague, Professor Howe, said, I think it is a concept that needs further elaboration, further support. It is a new concept, and I'm glad to know that the Department of Operational Support at the UN is behind it. I've talked to them, and they are enthusiastic, but I think it needs more elaboration. And there's a dire need, I think, for a roadmap for implementation. What do the next steps involve? Now, second question, which you've already heard addressed here, is how to expand the female UN peacekeepers and successful cases of capacity building. There's no question that gender diversity among troop and police contributing countries strengthens operational effectiveness by ensuring multiple perspectives are considered, especially those affecting civilians, particularly women and girls. Professor Howe mentioned the ELSI initiative, which was launched by Canada at the Peacekeeping Defense Ministerial in 2017. It comprises many components, including bilateral partnerships, a global fund, political advocacy efforts to create more receptive mission environments, and significant research, monitoring, and evaluation. It is sought to create transformational change and a more inclusive and effective future for peace operations where missions are better prepared to deliver on their mandates and to support enduring peace around the world. This has been also a fertile ground and provide a basis for implementing greater bilateral cooperation. I'd also note that the following year, in 2018, the Secretary General produced a uniform gender parity strategy, which seeks to increase representation of women in UN peacekeeping operations in a sustainable manner. Already, we're seeing some progress on the targets set by that strategy and greater awareness among uniform contributing countries. And of course, this all is based on in many ways, or relates to UN Security Council Resolution 1325, which urged equal participation of women in all sectors of peacekeeping operations, including the military. More recently, in 2020, a UN Security Council resolution sponsored by Indonesia took a more nuanced view, and I think this is emblematic of how this view of gender diversity has really evolved over the last 20 years in peacekeeping. It emphasized the importance of cooperation, collaboration, and understanding among peacekeepers of any gender, and spotlighting how a balance of male and female peacekeepers, and Professor Howe mentioned, I think, some of the statistics, which are not too encouraging yet on that score, really can contribute to community engagement, better protection, and improved credibility of the mission. And Ambassador Park, you mentioned this earlier on. I spent some time in Afghanistan. I saw how female engagement with communities mattered, but it wasn't just females engaging with females, it was females being part of the whole peacekeeping and the whole sort of community engagement by the military that made such a difference. And I think that's really the key evolution that's happened in this area. And I find it very encouraging, and I hope we have a chance to have a little more of a discussion on that after our presentations. Finally, we're talking about trilateral partnerships between the UN, ROK, and providing countries. And it's no question that bilateral cooperation in support of UN peace operations can fill significant gaps and engage a wider circle of stakeholders. So it shouldn't necessarily have everything just running right through the UN itself, but countries working together, and we're seeing a lot of examples of that now. This is an important initiative that the ROK has promoted, and it's an excellent example of where ROK can demonstrate leadership. And again, Professor Howe, you mentioned, I think very usefully about sort of middle power diplomacy and a middle power role, and I think that is a very well defined in this area and a kind of an intriguing concept for us. Some opportunities are already being explored, including renewable energy generation, again, the one I'm focusing on, gender diversity in peace operations, and of course, improved medical capability. And many of this is happening through the UN's Triangular Partnership Program, which is a promising sort of framework for how this partnership can work among countries. One idea for further improvement would be for more donor countries to support and bolster the work of triennial working groups on contingent-owned equipment, and consider ways to supplement and strengthen the update of the contingent-owned equipment manual. This is getting a little bit into sort of UN peace operations nitty-gritty, but critically important because this manual is the way by which troop and police contributing countries kind of approach UN peacekeeping, and involves many financial and other kinds of incentives. And so getting that right is fairly important. And there's a 3-year process by which that manual is updated and renewed to take advantage and to take into account the evolutions in peace operations. Our Powering Peace project, for example, we are proposing ideas to the UN and troop and police contributing countries on ways they can deploy more renewable energy resources, including rethinking the division of responsibility for the provision of those resources between what the TPCCs do, the troop and police contributing countries, and what the UN does. And several donor countries at last year's UN Peacekeeping Ministerial, I think 6 in total, that was hosted here in Seoul, noted their interest and their support for greater renewable energy deployment. And we welcome very much the leadership of the Republic of Korea to provide financial support for building those partnerships and building out what that cooperation would look like. Thank you. Yes, exactly.
Thank you very much for drawing our attention to a very important element of UN peacekeeping, which is renewable energy. And it's an excellent point. And can I invite Professor Kang as the next presenter? Professor Kang Ho-Gyong, she is a professor of International Peace Operations Center, Korean National Defense University. Actually, she retired from Korean Army following working in various positions, Chief of Operation and the Training Section of the Military Intelligence Battalion to a Special Force Brigade. And she used to work as a military observer and staff officer UN peacekeeping operations in India and Pakistan, as well as Liberia, respectively. And her research field covers peace operations of the United Nations, including peacekeeping, Korean defense policy for overseas deployment, women, peace and security, and child protection. Now, floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me to have a good opportunity to present these important topics that we have made a progress. And my presentation will include more details on these topics, especially on what we Republic of Korea have done and what we will do. UN peacekeeping operations have continued to develop due to internal and external factors accordingly. Recently, violent conflicts have added not only physical clashes between disputed parties, but also cyber attacks in invisible cyberspace, intentional dissemination of misinformation and disinformation, and attacks using drones. Such increasing threats in the field hinder the implementation of the mandate of peacekeeping operations and endanger the safety of peacekeepers. In response to the complex operational environment, the number of tasks assigned to peacekeeping missions increases, and cooperation between military, police, and civilian components becomes increasingly necessary. Therefore, the introduction of a high technology to the peacekeeping mission has become inevitable in order to increase the effectiveness and efficiency of the implementation of a peacekeeping mandate, protect the peacekeepers, and ensure the sustainability of a mission performance. The launch of the A4P, Action for Peacekeeping Plus, and the UN's Strategy for the Digital Transformation of UN Peacekeeping in 2021 also emphasize the need for a combination of high-tech and peacekeeping. The Smart Camp in the Field mission is a product of a combination of high-tech and peacekeeping operations. It is a concept that improves the efficiency, economic feasibility, and stability of the camp operation by managing integrated information through a network, while operating the mission camp using high-tech technology. At the UN Peacekeeping Ministerial in 2021, Korea pledged to promote the Smart Camp pilot project in UNMISS, South Sudan. The Smart Camp will be applied to the Korean Hanbit unit to protect the troops, establish its own water purification system, power generation management system, and a waste disposal system, and then it connects each system systematically through an online network. The establishment of Smart Camp first improves the working environment of Korean peacekeepers and enables efficient unit management. The power generation management system utilizes solar energy to overcome the weak environment of the power infrastructure in South Sudan, and will also help protect resources and the environment in the region. Once the Smart Camp in Hanbit unit is completed, the concept of Korea's Smart Camp will be expanded to other TCC, PCC in UNMISS or other UN missions. Korea's pilot Smart Camp also has great implications in that Korea contributes to the development of a new camp model using Korea's IT skills. In order to continuously expand the UN Smart Camp in missions, it is necessary to review its operational performance in detail and share the evaluation results with the UN, NTCC, and PCC. And based on this, the UN complements and continues to develop the concept of the new camp. Member states' high concerns and active support are also important. In order to apply the concept of mission-specific smart camps in the future, it is necessary to identify the needs of each mission and establish a phase-based plan. Since the Security Council Resolution 1325, 11 Security Council resolutions have specifically developed the Women, Peace and Security, or WPS agenda. WPS agenda has been emphasized not only throughout the FOP, for peacekeeping, but also Action for Peacekeeping, but also throughout the Action for Peacekeeping Plus. And the implementation of the agenda has become the most important part of the success of peacekeeping. The UN stressed women's equal participation and full involvement in all efforts for the maintenance and promotion of peace and security, and urged the member states to ensure increased representation of women in national, regional, and international institutions, to expand the role and the contribution of women in UN field-based operations. The ROC Defense Ministry dispatched almost less than 600 people to 4 of the 12 peacekeeping missions this year. The number of women is less than 30, although it is still a small portion of the total, but Korea will continue to expand opportunities for women at all levels to participate by finding suitable positions and improving the field environments. A way to strengthen the capabilities of female peacekeepers is to train them in the Korean Peacekeeping Center. ROC Peacekeeping Center has a well-organized environment, including high-quality programs to ensure females' active participation in missions. The 9-week of pre-deployment course of the center consists of 28 UN designated subjects and additional subjects tailored for peacekeepers, particularly modules for gender equality and sexual violence prevention, along with the WPS and CRSV are added to support understanding gender perspective and gender equality awareness of all male and female peacekeepers. There is another course to strengthen women's capability organized by the UN Women, is the UN FMAC, Female Military Officers Course. It is designed to directly respond to the lack of progress toward increasing the number of military women in peacekeeping and to provide training for the dual role many female peacekeepers are asked to play, actually. During the Seoul UN Peacekeeping Ministerial last year, Korea pledged to host FMAC together with the UN Women. We are preparing to host one FMAC Female Military Officers course in Korea from next year for 5 years. Furthermore, the Korean Peacekeeping Center is considering its own capacity building course targeting women who are going to or want to join peacekeeping operations. Encouraging and expanding participation in peacekeeping operations by female peacekeepers with a considerable level of field-based knowledge and practical skills are recognized as important factors that greatly contribute to mission success. These activities of women peacekeepers help local women in the conflict area to recognize gender awareness, survive and support the local women, and further play a key role in achieving gender mainstreaming in that country and achieving gender equality, which is the final destination of the WPS agenda. Therefore, the encouragement of women's participation in peacekeeping should not only mean a simple quantitative increase of women, but also strengthen their capability qualitatively, responding to the operational conditions. The UN Triangular Partnership Program, TPP, launched in 2015 as a direct outcome of the 2014 Leaders Summit on UN Peacekeeping, mainly operates a curriculum to cultivate TCC, PCC peacekeeping capabilities. The UN plans, manages, and promotes the implementation of raising core competencies of TCC, PCC peacekeepers, and the supporting countries provide trainers, training equipment, financing, and other support to those countries through UN training programs. And the TCC, PCC sends their personnel to the peacekeeping after the training. TPP aims to enhance peacekeepers' capabilities, especially in the areas of engineering, medical care, C4ISR, and campus security technology. Korea has been sending a battalion-sized engineering unit to UNMISS in South Sudan. If Korea participates as a supporting country in the UN TPP, it is desirable to provide training courses to countries that will send the engineering troops to peacekeeping operations in the near future. This year is the first year for Korea to join the UN TPP, so Korea needs to develop its plans on what should be included in the training course and what kind of engineering equipment is proper for the supported countries, and a selection of instructors and what countries require Korea's support most, in cooperation with the UN. TPP will make Korea have a continuous cooperative relations with the country after the training program. In addition to the TPP, Korea will have to participate in bilateral cooperation or low coordination mechanism, LCM, in which a supporting country directly consult the areas and scope of cooperation regarding training with the TCC and PCC. The mining program, in which Korea has accumulated its techniques through DMZ mine clearing operations, may be proposed as well. Discussions are underway right now to open a training course centering on ASEAN countries, specifically toward the second half of the 2023. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Kang, for your detailed presentation. Now I'd like to exercise the liberty of moderator to make questions to each of panelists based on your presentations. And my first question goes to two ministers, Minister of Ghana and Uganda. In your presentation, both of you emphasized the partnerships are at the heart of peacekeeping. And Mr. Amankamanu, in particular, you suggested the idea of trilateral partnership. And as a suggestion, partnering with the Women Peace Security Institute of Kofi Annan Peacekeeping Training Center to establish capacity building cooperation. So I hope the Korean government will explore this suggestion and materialize it. And in this regard, both of you can give us some successful bilateral and trilateral cooperation projects where your government has been engaged so far, since both of your countries are major contributing countries. So can you give us some examples, some successful projects you have been engaged with other government?
Thank you very much. I think that I will narrow my discussion on this issue, or based on your question, to the successes checked so far by UN in some African countries where my country, Ghana, played a critical role. We all know that partnership has become the center of UN activities in recent times. You look at a country like Liberia. When the issues of Liberia started, Ghana led the ECOMOG contingent to Liberia, basically to douse the waters. That for me was a cooperation, and ECOMOG was made up of, the soldiers or the men were drawn from countries within the ECOWAS sub-region. There was that partnership, and that really led to the UN coming in. So when the UN came in, the fire had been doused, and so the UN was able to lead Liberia into having, peaceful elections and power being transferred to a democratically elected government in Liberia. The same thing happened in Cote d'Ivoire, and the same thing happened in Sierra Leone. This partnership actually made it possible for the UN to ensure that power was transferred to the democratically elected government, and so by so doing, the rule of law was brought to bear, and so peace was achieved. You mentioned Kofi Annan. I mentioned it earlier on, and thank you for promoting the idea that countries should partner Kofi Annan to explore what is it that we have to offer. If you go to Kofi Annan as we speak, we have people from all over the world coming there to tap into the education or what Kofi Annan has to offer. Partnership is built at Kofi Annan to make sure that we expand the frontiers of peacekeeping. And so these are some of the steps my country is doing in terms of partnership with other countries to make sure that operations of the UN and the objectives are well achieved.
Thank you. And,
Thank you very much, Ambassador Park. Like in my statement previously, I indicated a few areas where Uganda has been involved. And for example, you mentioned Liberia, that's in the early 90s. Uganda was involved there, and very successful story where they've been to support the UN-led interventions. And for the East African Standby Force, Uganda is also instrumental in the development of East African Standby Force, which is a component and with other African Union affiliated countries for conflict resolution. And we have that as ongoing with the mandate drawn from the UN, but with our regional experience. Uganda has participated in several joint multinational military exercises in the region and has developed, as I speak now, a rapid deployment capability for future African Union and East African missions. The examples drawn by the other professors here about South Sudan is classical for Uganda, that we intervened, and I think the UN is still there, but the conflicts there to go and do peacekeeping has been greatly appreciated within the region. And of course, the recent ones you can find in the DRC Congo, where we have the UN mission there. But due to our peculiar situation, Uganda being a landlocked country, it's not a peninsula like Korea. The terrorists attack us at Uganda and run to DRC. We agreed with DRC, and they allowed us to pursue. But now, under the East African Standby Force, negotiations are going on so that with the UN support that the peacekeeping force could be taken there, and we believe it will work out because of the local content. Yeah.
Thank you very much for sharing the partnership you have been engaged. And now I'd like to ask a question to Professor Ha. And you reminded us that ROK was the host of the largest UN enforcement operation to date. South Korea, well, I believe it is the most powerful success story of UN peacekeeping and the peace building operation so far. So our freedom, our peace, and prosperity owe a lot to the United Nations and the international community we know. So the Korean government is making various efforts to increase its contribution in terms of personnel, financing, and training, which was demonstrated in Seoul initiative with 6 pledges. Those pledges are to be implemented. And you mentioned a lot about the middle power contributions. So what would be your suggestions for the Korean government at this stage? Or I mean, there could be many suggestions, but 1 or 2 priority things the Korean government should pay attention immediately.
Well, thank you very much for that very tricky question. At risk of biting the hand that feeds me, I would like to take a fairly critical perspective on Korea's achievements in order to balance all the praise that maybe we've heaped on Korea previously. So, while the previous administration in Seoul pledged to raise Korea's contributions, and the new administration is committed to playing a greater role as a good global citizen, such promises really need to be backed up with concrete action. Even in terms of financial pledges, Korea only ranks 10th and does not feature in the top 20 in terms of true contributions, despite having one of the world's largest militaries. This is a similar story to Korea's championing of green growth with the Green Growth Initiative at the UN, while still falling behind on carbon emissions. You know, it's all very well to provide leadership in ideas, but they've got to be backed up. So I think, first of all, Korea needs to walk the talk. They need to back up their strong policy statements with actual resources. Secondly, Korea has been a major champion of public diplomacy, as of course Ambassador Park is well aware. The first country to enact a public diplomacy law, and has emphasized that public diplomacy forms a key part of its soft power projection. A major element of public diplomacy is the power of attraction, which only works when a country has a good reputation for following through on its promises or putting its money where its mouth is. So I think it's probably point one, part one, and part two. Secondly, Korea's been criticized in peer reviews from the OECD Development Assistance Committee for acting unilaterally in its development assistance. The same could be said of its humanitarian and peace-building assistance. Korea needs to demonstrate not only a willingness to cooperate with others, but also leadership in doing so. When Korean peacekeepers cooperated with those from Japan, and indeed borrowed ammunition from them, they were roundly criticized for doing so. Middle power peacekeeping promotion needs to rise above national rivalries. Third, Korea needs to leverage its comparative advantage in technology and training, diverting significant resources to these endeavors, including in terms of knowledge transfer. And actually, I was very pleased to hear Professor Kang talking about the role that the Peacekeeping Operations Center is playing at the Korean National Defense University. So I'm sure that she will defend robustly Korea's role as I play devil's advocate. So thank you.
Thank you very much. We take your criticism as a strong encouragement. And Mr. Hyde, you put importance to renewable energy production and consumption across the camp and the surrounding communities. What challenges do you think the United States has, United Nations, UN, has to use more renewable energy, not only for the peacekeeping operation, but overall UN system? Is it an issue of political commitment, or it's a matter of money, cost?
Well, the easy answer is yes, all of the above. I think it's really a question. It's those things you mentioned. It's also just sort of organizational capacity and organizational configuration. There's a lot of sort of directions to go in this. I'll just cite maybe 4 areas where I think there'd be room for the UN to improve and some of the obstacles it faces. One, as you rightly point out, is on the political side. And we're seeing examples now of where mission mandates for UN peace operations actually include the imperative of using more renewable energy. And that sends a strong, powerful signal, I think, to all the stakeholders that this is an important priority and should be pursued. And so we'd like to see more of that opportunity. 2, I think, is a question of getting the right staff in the field who can develop these, who can design, develop, and manage these projects. This is pretty, in the end, this is sort of relatively simple technology, but incorporating it in a peace operation in a very difficult environment can be a specialized challenge, and that needs the appropriate staff, both to advocate for it and then to implement it. And we're seeing, again, pilot cases where that works well. We'd like to see that spread throughout. Third, I think, again, we've been talking about it all this afternoon, but is partnerships and really sort of building up partnerships among stakeholders. And that's both for financing this, because you talked about the cost, and the cost is a problem. I mean, I think for all of us who know anything about renewable energy, it's that upfront cost which can be very daunting, especially when you're thinking about solar. It pays off, obviously, in the end, and to me, the question is how many years does it pay off? And in some cases, in UN peace operations, we've seen it can pay off in 2 or 3 years, and then start yielding real cost savings afterwards. But nonetheless, the way the UN is configured, the way the troop contributing countries are configured, that reimbursement schedule I talked about, it makes the upfront cost very, very daunting, and so partnerships are one answer to that. And we're seeing examples, as I mentioned, the 6 pledges made here at the Seoul Ministerial, several countries, donor countries, and TCCs getting together to do that. And then fourth and finally, I'd say I mentioned that I think the future is really public-private partnerships, and what the public piece of that can be is to mitigate the risk to the private sector. What does that look like? De-risking, political risk insurance, the UN as an anchor customer to guarantee a market. There's a whole bunch of tools out there that can be used, but people need to be flexible, need to be leaning forward and creative in how to use those tools. Thank you.
Thank you. And Professor Kang, you have field experience as PKO officer in various places. So based on your field experience, during your work as a peacekeeper, what kind of frustration and challenges you had as a female officer? And what kind of advice will you give to your female colleagues who wants to join PKO?
Yes, when I had those questions from our moderator, and I just tried to remember my period in 2 peacekeeping missions, it was really tough because peacekeeping environment is very tough, and then I made one excellent essay here to memorize everything, and then I will read a little bit, and then you will get some point from this essay, and maybe Professor Howe will give me an A+. Okay. Yes, peacekeeping, as I said, peacekeeping environment is very tough. It is true that I always should be always alert to my surroundings, because it is not an environment in which my safety and security are fully guaranteed. Especially in places like remote areas, because I worked in a remote area, the environment was poor. All my colleagues working in the same place came from different countries and had a diverse religious, cultural, political, and economic backgrounds. Their values, perspectives on things, and standards on things, and people were also diverse. Among these many differences, what took me a lot of time to adapt was the difference in perception of gender. Gender is socially constructed. After all, so each person accepts it differently and has various attitudes toward women, whether they are local people in those areas or peacekeepers. There were times when I felt uncomfortable with their attitudes or gaze, even with the same peacekeepers. In some cases, the defect of speaking when I speak and when my male colleague speaks is completely different. Sometimes I felt that I was not trusted by other persons. For example, it was time to drive a car because we had to drive on our own when we went on a patrol to drive a car to a destination for the daily task with the male colleagues. It was a long distance drive and I usually took turns, but all of my male colleagues drove on their own. I didn't know the reason at first, but later I found out that it was because they didn't know how excellent my driving skill was. I think someone might have had a perception that women are not good at driving. even though I passed the driving test when I was deployed to the mission. My leaders intentionally let me drive on the rough road to see my driving skill. It was a kind of assessment that men didn't do. In the end, I think the key is how much difference in a perception of various genders can be reduced according to the UN standards set. This may take a long time. And I want to say this to other female colleagues that the peacekeeping mission is a great work in which the international community, led by the United Nations, and eliminates conflicts and saves suffering civilians. And the world pursues a common purpose. We are the people who pile up a piece of brick to complete the greater activity. Therefore, you will have to be responsible for your duties and realize how valuable you are doing. To that end, it is most important for us to have the capabilities suitable for peacekeeping tasks. The role of women is growing and its importance is increasing. It is necessary to develop and provide appropriate capacity building programs to women peacekeepers so that they can demonstrate their capabilities in various realms. I think it is a positive phenomenon that a number of countries have recently supported these programs and made efforts to develop them. Rather than being satisfied with the ranking of military and peacekeeping contributions, Korea should actively create various support programs and cooperate with other member countries to join the efforts of UN. It is also a good idea to establish a database of competent female peacekeepers and have a system that can recommend them to the necessary positions. This is the last one is what I want to mention about WPS and the increasing capability of women peacekeepers. This is my
Thank you, Professor Kang. And since our session started 10-15 minutes late, I think we have around 5 minutes to end our session. So actually my final question, which can be addressed to any of you, is on a more fundamental issue. One of the most enduring and structural challenges inherent in all peace-related operations is how to break the vicious cycle of the relapse into conflict of a particular situation where the United Nations intervened in the form of a peacekeeping mission. So UN has led a lot of numerous peace operations throughout UN history over 7 decades, but the overall track record is mixed. And most peacekeeping missions today are in the recurring conflict situations. So this chronic nature of conflict, it clearly shows that the UN needs a more innovative and holistic approach to cover all elements of peace continuum, from prevention through peacemaking, peace building, to peace building. So my question is, I want to hear some frank assessment of UN scorecard in ensuring the cohesiveness in peace operations and thereby reducing the possibility of recurring conflicts. Anyone can give some insights on this issue? Yes, Minister.
Thank you. I think that there have been challenges along the way in the operations of the UN. But if I were to give a score, definitely I will give it a high point, even though we have some difficulties along the way. In Africa alone, there have been very good results from peacekeeping missions, positive interventions, including that of Liberia, as I mentioned, Cote d'Ivoire, and Sierra Leone. And then in all these situations, the missions were deployed with mandate, managed, to complete all phases of operations, conducted elections, and handed over power to legitimate government. On the other hand, there have been stalled situations also that some missions have stayed longer than they initially had been anticipated. And some of them actually change forms to adapt to the evolving operational environment. And even though a very difficult situation, the role of host nations remains paramount in achieving these results. Significantly, the support of local communities, civil society, non-governmental organizations, regional and sub-regional organizations, UN agencies, host government, and other key partners is also critical to strengthen peacekeeping so that it can save lives, advance political solutions, and help achieve sustainable peace. Nevertheless, over the years, the peacekeeping has adapted to meet the demands of different conflict and a changing political landscape. And to date, multinational peacekeeping operations are called upon not only to maintain peace and security, but also to facilitate the political process, protect civilians, disarm combatants, support elections, protect and promote human rights, and restore the rule of law. If you look at all these things, although, yes, we have situations where there have been recurring conflict, sometimes even when the UN is in force, or even when they have left. I sincerely believe that the UN will have to look at certain factors, to deal with certain factors, so that they can complete the element in the continuum, can really go on. First of all, I believe that the UN should look at the structural dimensions. All conflicts have underpinnings. The underlying factors may be some governance, political, ethnic, tribal, cultural, and all that. The UN has to look at the underpinnings of all these conflicts. And I believe that when the underpinnings are known, then better solutions can be profiled to deal with the situation in a particular area. We must also, the UN will have to also look at cultural dimensions. There are some areas where, you really have to be on top of the cultural dimensions of the area. If the cultural dimensions are not addressed, it will be very difficult to get to the root of the problem and to deal with the situation. It is a fact that the UN is dealing with there's a cultural gap, but I believe strongly that more has to be done. And so with more being done, the UN can better position itself to deal with issues of culture. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm afraid due to the time constraint, we don't have time to hear their views from other panelists. It's time to wrap up our session. And now I'm very grateful to all panelists for sharing their insight about the current challenges PKO faces, and as well as their thoughtful analysis of the priorities we should bear in mind. And I want to sum up with the three following takeaways. One, no need to mention that UN peacekeeping is an essential tool for maintaining international peace and security. Improvement of the PKO environment is the key, and the advancement toward agile, data-driven, and tech-enabled peacekeeping is an answer to it. We, international society, should gear up these efforts, including early materialization of the Smart Camp pilot project. And second, partnership among member states, including triangular and bilateral. It's increasingly important to support the UN peace operation. we are eager to see more concrete, successful projects to benchmark. And the last one, despite some setbacks, there are best practices to create an enabling environment for women, including Ghana's example of child care and home leave policy, and dispatching female general to peace missions. So filling women in higher level positions and decision-making process is also a very important mission we have to pursue, and still long way to go. So let me conclude with our strong commitment to, for more effective peace operation by transforming our pledges of international community, as well as pledges of Korean government into concrete actions. Thank you very much, everyone.
Well, thank you once again to our moderator and all of our panelists for a very engaging session once again. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's take a short 10-minute break and we will resume with special session 3. Thank you. And as we are slightly pressed on time, we ask that you are ready and set to start with special session 3 in just about 10 minutes. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, sir. 오늘 만찬 끝나고 그럼 전화 드려도 될까요? 9시에 끝나요. 네. 네. 네, 알겠습니다. 네, 알겠습니다. 네.
session?
So I think we're Distinguished guests, I believe that we are now all seated and ready to go. Thank you once again for attending this special session number 3 of Seoul Defense Dialogue 2022. And now our special session 3 will be held under the theme of Defense, Science and Technology for Military Modernization. And I hope that you have been listening in to various different sessions. And once again, we will be joined by a wide group of panelists along with our moderator. And so I would like to introduce our moderator to you, which will be Dr. Nam-Hoon Cho, the chair of the Committee on Future Strategic Studies for the Korea Institute for Defense Analyses. With that, I turn the floor over to Dr. Nam-Hoon Cho.
Good afternoon.
Dr. Cho, please turn on your microphone when you speak. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. Welcome to special session 3. I'm Dr. Nam-Hoon Cho, who is introduced before, and I will be moderating today's special session 3. The topic of this session is defense science technology for military modernization. Defense science and technology is very important because it provides efficient tools such as weapon systems and operating systems for military modernization. Especially AI and unmanned systems developed with the defense science technology are able to increase the level of automation and save manpower in the future battlefields, which in turn have effects on the war strategy and the way of fighting. Thus, the importance of defense science technologies cannot be stressed enough, and we will talk about this important topic during this session. Before jumping to the session, I'd like to introduce our panelists. My left, Director General Sang-Hyun Ma, Military Structural Reform Bureau, Ministry of National Defense, Republic of Korea. Make a big hand for him. And his left, William Elle, Senior Military Advisor, European External Action Service, European Union.
Thank you very much.
Welcome. And Dr. Won-Jun Jang, Research Fellow, Korea Institute for Industrial Economics and Trade. And last but not least, Stacy Patty John, Senior Fellow and Director, Defense Program, Center for a New American Security. Give her a big hand. Okay, now each panelist will have 5 minutes to briefly present their thought on the topics. So I'm going to give them an opening remarks for 5 minutes. We'll start by the Director General Ma.
Please wear your headset. I will speak in Korean. 안녕하십니까.
Good afternoon. As have been introduced, I am from the Ministry of National Defense. I am Ma Seung-yeon. I would like to take this opportunity to share with you military defense reforms 4.0 pursued by the Korean government. Well, first, the necessity of our Plan 4.0. The future security environment will be a completely new environment compared to the present environment. That is our forecast. we will see that North Korea will advance their nuclear programs, and there will also be uncertainties in Northeast Asia triggered by various factors, including the Sino-US conflict. We also expect that there will also be changes in the natural environment, including climate change and possible pandemics. As we have seen in the recent war in Ukraine, the fourth industrial revolution and the subsequent technologies is changing the front of warfare. US and other advanced countries are innovating their military capabilities. Within Korea, we have concerns concerning the decrease in population as well as the strain on military budgets. And therefore, due to the increase in operational cost, we believe that there will be difficulties in military operation environments. In order to agilely and proactively respond to these changes, we need to have a high-tech, science-based approach. That is Military Defense 4.0 pursued by the Korean government. We wish to become an AI-based military power, and that is not a choice, but a must. Last June, the Republic of Korea has announced an AI-based military capability as one of our national agenda, and the president himself also mentioned that we need to redesign the military on par with creating a completely new armed forces. Next, let me talk to you about the direction of our Plan 4.0. The armed forces of the Republic of Korea wishes to introduce high-tech advanced science across the military to become an AI-based military power. We have selected 5 areas for innovation. First, development of strategies and concepts. In line with the challenging environments that we forecast for the future, we wish to utilize AI autonomous robotics and also space as well. So we need to have strategies that incorporate all of these new factors. Second, we need to secure advanced capabilities. In the short term, it could be AI-based robotics, but we also would like to add intelligent weapon systems so that we can have quantitative and qualitative increases in our capabilities. Third is related to exercise and training. For this area, we need to make sure that we reorganize our troops in line with what we forecast for the future. And we also need to expand the capabilities of our soldiers. And we also need to make sure that they can operate in the new science and technology-based environment. Fourth is related to research. For this area, we will have a mechanism to quickly introduce any advanced technologies from the private sector through having our own R&D systems so that we can innovate our technologies quickly and agilely. And the fifth innovation area is the area where across the armed forces, we will be adding AI and database systems so that we have AI and based autonomous robotics as a core part of our military capabilities. In order for all of these innovations to succeed, we must make sure that we develop our processes in line with the development of science and technology. And we also have to have the right environment in place. We also need to have AI autonomous robotics applied across armed forces. Currently, the Armed Forces of Korea has come up with various detailed, tangible tasks as a part of the Plan 4.0 to achieve the 5 mentioned innovations. Let's take a look at some expected results of our Plan 4.0. Through this plan, we wish to create science and technology-based armed forces that wins the trust and heart of the people so that we can win in every war. Especially with the three-pillar intelligence system, we will enhance our capabilities to respond to the nuclear capabilities of North Korea. And by creating a hybrid environment using AI, we will work on resolving the shortage of soldiers due to the decrease in population. We also wish to create a system of low cost and high efficiency so that we can solve various challenges that we are faced with at this point in time. Last but not least, just like any other country in the world, in order for this new plan to succeed, we need the active participation of the military as well as the support of the people of Korea. Thank you very much.
Thank you, General Ma. He talked about the Defense Innovation 4.0's aim or the execution plan or the other things. But later I will ask some important detailed fields like the collaboration or cooperation with the civilian parts or it's very difficult to raise the personnel or getting some manpower from the civilian parts. I will ask about that later. Think about that one. Next, I will invite the Admiral Ho-Gyong.
Yeah, thank you very much. And first of all, let me say that it is a true pleasure to be here at the SDD, and I thank the organizers for inviting the European Union and to participate especially in this panel. Thank you so much. Remaining at the cutting edge of technological development is critical for ensuring the European Union's prosperity, security, and way of life. New technologies are transforming the security and defense sectors at a faster pace than ever before and blurring the dividing line between the civilian and military domains. It is thus essential to ensure that Europe's security and defense sectors remain technologically fit for purpose as well. Therefore, the future European security and defense technological and innovation landscape should be developed under EU cooperative framework from outset. Stemming from these needs, EU member states adopted the strategic compass in March this year, our new strategic document. The strategic compass is clear in stating that we need to invest more and better in military capabilities and emerging technologies, fill strategic gaps and reduce strategic dependencies. Our capacity to act depends on the right capabilities and investments. If we want to be better prepared to respond to crisis, we need to strengthen our EU's defense industry and our capacity to innovate and leverage new technologies together. At the same time, the strategic compass was adopted, the Russia invasion of Ukraine became an evident, I would like to say it and call it, wake-up call for EU security and defense. It further demonstrated the need not only to spend more, but to spend together, because this is the only way of spending better. Further underlining what I just have stated, the increasing number of crises in and around Europe clearly demonstrate that more than ever, the European cooperation must become the norm. The threats and challenges we face are simply too daunting for our member states. We have 27 member states in the European Union to deal with on their own. So only together we can achieve this. However, as a response to Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine, we are seeing a positive trend that almost all European countries increase their defense spending and investment. But we need not only to spend more, as I just said, we have also to spend better and more efficient. The fact that EU member states have said they will increase defense spending by a total of around 200 billion euros is certainly most welcome. However, unless the proportion that is spent on joint development and procurement increases, the risk is that a lot of that extra investment will go to waste. So we have to prevent this. We also look at the future and longer-term needs, for which we need innovation to modernize our armed forces. We know that we either innovate or we risk becoming irrelevant in the field of security and defense. The European Commission's roadmap on critical technologies for security and defense, which was published recently and adopted recently, outlines the way forward for EU and member states to jointly reach our goals, notably by, for example, identifying technologies critical for European Union and boosting them through European programs, while also ensuring that defense considerations are better taken into account in civilian European programs and policies. The EU and its member states already have access to some of the most innovative solutions and equipment in the world. For example, many of the anti-tank weapons used with such effectiveness by the Ukrainian forces over the past month were designed and built in Europe. To retain an edge over competitors and potential adversaries, we must make full use of emerging and disruptive technologies to develop capabilities across the full spectrum. This requires strong links between civilian innovation and defense innovation. The defense sector has often been at the forefront of innovation. Space-based navigation systems such as Galileo and the GPS are well-known examples. But innovation today is often led by civilian companies and driven by commercial markets. For example, the development of 5G network technologies for the civilian market also allows for unprecedented speed and volume of data transfers for new military applications. Space is another example. From a mostly sovereign and non-commercial domain, it has evolved into one where private actors are increasingly active and provide services relevant for defense applications, from space-based observations and communication to space traffic management. In fact, civilian and defense innovation are increasingly blended. Think of the widespread deployment of commercial drones for intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, and targeting in the war in Ukraine. It shows how the innovative use of civilian technologies affects battlefield outcomes. So, ladies and gentlemen, let me conclude this brief introduction by saying that hopefully you could grasp this rather complex picture on what the EU and its member states are currently doing, in short, for having modern and interoperable European armed forces, and that we very much look forward to further cooperation with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. He talked about the experience in Europe, and he talked about some cooperation between civilian and military industries.
Yes.
My question later is that you talked about the cooperation between two parts. What about the cooperation between countries? If one member in EU invented or applied the new technology, it will transfer to other countries, or so the cooperation amongst countries in your EU is well-being or not?
Yes.
That's later. And
okay.
That's
yes.
my first question. And second one is, you talked about after the Russia-Ukraine war, the EU countries tried to increase their budget, defense budget.
Yes.
I wonder it actually goes to the new technology part. Just try to replace the conventional weapons, which is supplied to Ukraine. So answer later.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Next, Dr. Kang.
Yes. Thank you. It's my honor and privilege to be a presenter for this important dialogue. I'm just focusing on the defense science technology for military modernization. Speaking of the General Mods, MND's comments for defense innovation 4.0, I just suggest some of the suggestions to complete defense innovation 4.0 in the near future. As you know, the global security environment instability is highly sustainable. So many experts said that the new Cold War is just already arrived. As you can see, the Ukraine warfare, not just the Ukraine warfare, China also conducted a live fire drill near in Taiwan last month, and also North Korea has also fired dozens of ballistic missiles, including hypersonic missiles, 20 times this year. Of each North Korean version of Iskander, KN-23 is identified as an evasive, short-range ballistic missile capable of hitting all areas of South Korean territory. In this end, the new Korean government is actively promoting the AI science and technology strong force through Defense Innovation 4.0. In order to successfully achieve this strong defense innovation policy of the new government within this term, it is important to change the idea of completely breaking away from the existing legacy and frameworks to the level of the second foundation. In honor of the Defense Ministry's initiative, I would like to make two suggestions for the successful implementation of Defense Innovation 4.0 in terms of defense technology and military modernization. The lessons learned from the Ukraine war and the defense innovation for developed countries can be summarized as maximizing advanced civilian technology capabilities in all areas of defense, increasing weapons and non-weapons on the basis of strong allies. We need to clearly recognize that we are living in an era of total war with allies. First, it is necessary to set more specific goals to achieve the objective fostering the AI science and technology strong force for completing Defense Innovation 4.0. According to the MND, the goal of Defense Innovation 4.0 is to secure core capabilities, weapons, infrastructure, operational capability, and so on, based on high-end technology infrastructure. It is worth noting that the United States has set out 5 core competencies for unmanned, long-range fire, stealth, technology, underwater, and network integration to achieve their third offset strategy in 2014. First of all, in terms of weapons and infrastructure, it is necessary to focus on its capabilities on our worsened areas of ISR, C4I, a Korean-style missile defense system, manned and unmanned teaming, which is MND, and space, cyber, and electromagnetic areas, which has shown the importance of Ukraine war. The second, more specific and innovative measures were required in terms of the methodology itself for the success of Defense Innovation 4.0. As you know, the U.S. drastically rejected PPBS method of the 1960s and introduced a so-called middle-tier acquisition in the late 2010s. Deploying most of its major weapon systems, including the latest main battle tanks, armored vehicles, vertical takeoff and landing aircraft, which is a future vertical lift, hypersonic missiles, and high-end military goggles, EVAs, in just 4 to 5 years of development period nowadays. The DoD Defense Innovation Unit has developed more than 250 fieldable prototypes, attracted more than 30 transitions, which is a follow-on production, and attracted more than $20 billion in private investment, and collaborated with 8 allies in just 2 to 3 years of project periods. This is not all. The software acquisition process has been newly established as a normal acquisition process in the US. Therefore, it is possible to upgrade the warship software, which took 18 months in just 24 hours. So in 2019, the United States, the Pentagon established the AAF, which is Adaptive Acquisition Frameworks, which includes 6 flexible acquisition methods, and phrase them as the most transformational change of acquisition policy in the last few decades. Germany is also do their innovative works for the acquisition methods, including IT acquisition and rapid acquisition too. So accordingly, we, the South Korea, should urgently prepare a Korean rapid acquisition process that can be completed within 4 to 5 years, including performance improvement program, which is PIP, evolutionary development, and software-centered weapon systems, and major non-weapon systems, including water platform, and so on. In addition, it is necessary to prepare comprehensive legal and institutional arrangements, establish rapid acquisition organization of MND and DARPA, and armed forces, remove budgets and regulations, and prepare some of the incentives for the companies. In particular, as you know, in the space and cyber sectors, it is necessary to come up with the high-tech capabilities by domestic and foreign commercial IT companies, along with the defense R&D and weapon system development. As you know, the Ukraine war, Planet Labs, iSize, Maxa Technologies, and analyzing dynamics and circumstances of Russian troops in Ukraine in real time. Tesla, as you know, the Elon Musk, Starlink also provide the battlefield situation to Ukraine where the internet network has been destroyed. In the cyber field too, in response to the malware attack on more than 70 Ukraine government websites, in January this year, the Ukraine government and Microsoft cooperate to repel the Russian cyber attack with the distribution of the malware 365 defend the endpoint detection. So South Korea should also make every effort to apply AI, big data, cloud, space, and cyber technologies owned by private high-tech companies such as Kakao, Naver, Samsung, LG, and Hyundai Motor, which is owned by Boston Dynamics, to the entire defense sector as soon as possible. So it is well known that 2015 Secretary of Defense Ash Carter invited anti-war activist, this is a Google CEO Eric Schmidt, as a chairman of the Defense Innovation Board, with several attempts to recruit him. Through this, the Pentagon should clearly recognize that it is currently called AI-ready force, AI-ready DoD, and is driving AI innovation in the defense sector. So I hope MND will lead successfully AI science and technology strong force in the near future. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Zhang. He's actually the industry expert. He talks about their industry and technologies. I have a question to him that you mentioned a lot of ways and measures to increase their, to improve their those fields. Later, I want you to talk about what's the priorities amongst them. And I guess one of the most important thing in those fields is that to establish some ecological systems. The technology is important in AI and unmanned systems, but they need some system to cooperate. We call it ecological systems. So to improve the cooperation, between the civilian and government and country to country. So what do we have to do? For example, it's like you talked about your neighbor and Google's to cooperate in their big data field. But is it really possible to apply directly apply that the civilians' big data to the defense field? It seems to be really difficult to do that. So what kinds of systems or the organization or something we need? Talk about that later. Okay, last, Stacy.
Good afternoon. It's an honor to be here. Thank you to the Ministry of National Defense for the invitation and for organizing this dialogue. I'm going to paint what probably turns out to be a fairly bleak picture about the future of warfare, hitting on 4 key trends that I think are going to shape future battlefields generally, and in particular on the Korean Peninsula as well. So I'm not looking too far in the future. These are all trends that are already manifesting today and in some ways maturing. And in many respects, this is sort of the democratization of many military technologies and their availability to a wide variety of actors in a way that they haven't been before, which I believe is going to make battlefields of the future more lethal, to increase incentives for preemption or prevention, and to potentially raise the risk of escalation. So I know this is a great way to end the day. I'm painting a very rosy picture here. A quick caveat, I don't have a magic ball, and it's really hard, and many people much smarter than me have been wrong in terms of predicting the effects of different military technologies, because it's really how they're used in combination with each other and which organizations adapt to best use them. So please be mindful of that. So the first trend that I think is important is the proliferation of precision. And we've heard this throughout the day, going back to the first plenary session this morning. For a while, this was a capability that only the United States had, and then it started to spread to different allies. And now Russia has precision weapons, China has precision weapons, and increasingly North Korea is developing long-range precision-guided weapons that are increasingly accurate, and I think makes them more likely to potentially be used. Some of the new short-range ballistic missiles that they've been testing, as well as the cruise missiles, and it opens up the opportunity for a country like North Korea to not launch attacks that are intended to terrorize and target civilian targets, but to use them in a more discriminating manner against military targets to have a military effect. So this is reducing the sanctuary. You're seeing this across battlefields everywhere. Countries can reach out if they have the appropriate sensors and battle networks and strike forces hundreds, if not thousands of miles from where they are. The second trend that I think is important is another one that many people have mentioned, which is drones and the increasing autonomy. So more than 100 countries have drones today, and most of these are smaller, commercially available systems. We've seen in terms of fighting in Libya, in Nagorno-Karabakh, and in Ukraine, how drones can provide a sort of air power on the cheap. They provide an ability for intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, targeting, sometimes for artillery systems, and also for direct strike. The promise of drones and autonomous systems has not really been fully realized, in large part because most of the existing capabilities that are fielded today are remotely piloted aircraft. So someone's still controlling them. We read about in the news drone swarms. Really, a drone swarm ends up being more than one drone, normally each of them controlled by one person. They're not actually coordinating their behavior autonomously yet. But that is something that is probably on the horizon. The next trend that is related to these and helps with the long-range strike is the commercialization of space. and the fact that space used to be a domain that very few states had access to or capabilities in, and now some of the most important actors are not states, they are private entities. We've seen this being important in terms of revealing different capabilities. Open source analysts have identified the ICBM silo fields in China. They keep track of the developments that are going on in North Korea in terms of their nuclear program and different missile and weapons tests. You also have found that countries like Iran supposedly used commercially available satellite imagery for targeting when it fired the ballistic missiles at Al Assad Air Base in Iraq. And then there are the communications opportunities and the fact that the Ukrainians are leveraging Starlink to have resilient communications in the face of Russian electronic warfare attacks. The final trend is probably the most disturbing one, and that's the fact that nuclear weapons are becoming increasingly relevant to a number of states and a number of their strategies. I believe, and I've argued in a recent report I wrote at CNAS, that we have entered a multipolar nuclear world. We now have 3 great powers that are developing significantly larger arsenals than the other states, and there is a new nuclear power with North Korea. I don't think denuclearization is a reasonable or realizable goal in the near term. And I think that if we don't seriously consider the risks of nuclear escalation and how to manage it, especially as it relates to the conventional nuclear balance and integration, and how to reinforce, the United States needs to reinforce its extended deterrent commitments and strengthen the nuclear umbrella that it provides over allies, that we're going to be in trouble in the future. So with these 4 trends, I don't see the battlefield becoming I see it becoming a bloodier and potentially riskier place in the future. And it's very worrisome, and it is something that is likely to extend across the globe because some of these technologies, nuclear weapons being one of the big exceptions, are being driven by commercial developments that are going to be widely available to many different actors.
Thank you, Stacy. She talked about your future battlefield, what kinds of technologies will be realized, and so on. She talked about that. My question is, how soon it will be realized? When you talk about, for example, when you talk about the automations, what kinds of automation we talk about? What's the level? Some talks that about the full automation, while the others talks about the half automatizations. So when Korea just aims the AI or automation, what kinds of level should be set up, or the aiming is should be done in the short term, the range, or the middle long-term range? Can you talk about that one? Also, personally, I'm very interested in the electromagnetic warfare. 2017, North Korea launched the Mustam missiles, and at the time, the New York Times told that they failed 7 times out of 8 because United States did electromagnetic warfare, and the United States government actually denied. I don't know about the level of the American technology, but how soon those kinds of technology can be realized? Maybe that cannot be realized forever. So what's your expectations? That's my question. Okay, thanks for all your excellent briefs. So coming back to my question, you just while the others are presenting their the materials, you maybe you think about your question I raised. So first, General Admiral Urigan, You remember the two questions I raised? Yeah.
Of course. Yes, and thank you for the question. And I would like to answer your question by very briefly elaborating on two initiatives of the European Union. The first one I would like to mention is a permanent structured cooperation with its binding commitments and currently 60 projects as an important framework for cooperation between the EU member states. And the main aim is to gradually shift from isolated member state projects towards planned and impact-based cooperation activities with the objective to establish a more coherent European capability landscape and delivering the right capabilities, to undertake the most demanding missions and thereby provide an improved security to the European Union. And here I would like to mention that there is a possibility also for non-EU countries to participate in individual PESCO projects. So as, for example, Canada, Norway, and the United States joined the PESCO project. We call it military mobility. And just as an example, and this has paved the way for stronger and more ambitious defense cooperation with partners in EU framework. And these PESCO projects also incorporate, of course, new technologies. So member states cooperate here. And the second one I would like to mention, and this is very important, in order to help member states' effort, the Commission and the High Representative just recently presented a so-called joint communication on defense investment gaps, with further measures to strengthen the European defense industrial and technological base. And this analysis showed very clearly, due to underinvestment, the defense capabilities and technologies that we have do currently not match the ones we need for the threats we face. And the data also clearly showed that the problem besides is the declining levels of cooperation over the past years. So member states didn't cooperate enough, they just cooperate, within their own country. And just to give you a figure, in 2020, only 11% of defense equipment procurement was done collaboratively, far below the agreed benchmark of 35%. And the issue is therefore, again, not only to spend more, but to spend together in order to spend better and prevent further fragmentation while filling our long-standing gaps. And also in this regard, you mentioned Ukraine. And this defense investment gaps report also showed that the EU member states, had, first of all, not much to provide for the Ukraine. So munition. So it's also not related to defense technology, high technologies alone, but also to fill now the stockpiles of European member states with regard to ammunition, just to mention an example that we can provide to support the Ukraine. So, but I must say, besides everything I said, I think with all these initiatives, the European Union is on a very good path and in a very good way to spend more efficient, to collaborate better in future, and the most important thing, to develop the right capabilities we need in future. Thank you.
Good. The reason that I ask you that, the cooperation situation between EU countries is because whether there were the cooperation between Korea and EU were possible, but you talked that even there the cooperation within the EU countries, you have the cooperation between non-EU countries and the EU.
Yes.
So that's the futures of EU and Korea has to I think.
So theoretically spoken, as I said, we have 60 projects in the permanent structured cooperation, all fields of defense. And basically it would be possible theoretically that South Korea could join such a PESCO project. And only a few member states participate in the PESCO project. Not all member states, just member states which are interested, and they have to fill binding commitments. But as I said, United States, Canada, and Norway already joined, and we are very happy for that. One of our PESCO projects.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Zhang?
Yes, as I just mentioned that the Ukraine war and the other advanced countries' defense innovation already just shows the how to do to just innovate our Korean defense system. The first, the Ukraine, as you can see, the many commercial space companies like ISI and many others. The DoD just requests the other commercial companies to just present some of their collected data and analyze it, and just present it to the DoD, and then the DoD also just presented to all the forces of the Ukraine and other U.S. countries in the field of territory of Ukraine. So that just really works to just defend the Ukraine itself till now. So. And the cyber areas too, the Microsoft also support the Ukraine government, as I just mentioned. So we just try to utilize the kind of concept, not just integrate all the data, all the space and cyber assets to develop by the MND or armed forces itself, but we're gonna just try to use that kind of data and knowledges of their own. That's the first answer. And the second is in the middle of 1910s, the U.S. and other Germany and other many countries just try to focus on their innovation of the acquisition process itself. So they just throw away the PPBS based acquisition itself. Within that kind of old traditional action process, we cannot just deal with all the AIs and big data because it's too long to spend, too a lot of money to spend. So it's not going to work. So that's why they just focus on developing the middle tier acquisition process and the software acquisition process itself. So they're going to just present 6 flexible acquisition ways to do it. So armed forces just try to select their own pathways, action pathways for their characteristics of the armor, the weapon system itself. So we also have to follow that kind of concept, not just focus on these left acquisition pilot program, which is just really a pilot program, which is a very small amount of money. It's less than 2% of whole defense R&D budget. It's not going to work. So OTA R&D budget in the United States is more than 1/3 of the whole U.S. defense R&D budget within just 5 years. So we're going to just follow that kind of concept and prepare some of the new kind of fast track acquisition process for the armed forces itself and the commercial company itself. We have to just throw away some of all the obstacles and regulations to try to find out. That's the kind of the MND's effort for the next 5 years to focus on. That's my answer.
I'm horrified that you're trying to emulate the American acquisition process, even with OTA, because it still has a lot of problems. But how soon will there be automation? Well, it's already there, right? A lot of our air defense systems are, after a certain point, are completely automated. You have loitering munitions out there, but these are sort of the exception rather than the rule. And there are a number of reasons that you don't see this level of autonomy yet on the battlefield. And some of them are good ones because we don't have a testing and evaluation system yet to make sure that we have safe and reliable artificial intelligence. So we know that we can put faith in it. There are still unanswered questions about where the human is in the decision-making process. The United States insists that there will be a man at least on the loop, if not in the loop, or a woman, my bad on the gender there, who could be making or overseeing the decisions, but it's really hard to figure out exactly how that will happen and how that will accelerate the decision-making process as much as the hope is if there is a person that is intervening for each single decision along the way. It might be more of a form of mission command, that there are certain parameters that are given to autonomous systems. But in the United States, at least, there's bureaucratic and service resistance in some ways to autonomy. To pick up my favorite service, the Air Force has been very resistant to even allowing the Reaper drones that it has right now to do automatic takeoff and landing, when the Army MQ-1s do the exact same thing, and it actually works a little bit better. You also have a digital infrastructure problem. The Pentagon's digital backbone is abhorrent, and there needs to be a lot of improvements there before they're going to be able to support the type of AI-driven systems. I would hope that you'll see autonomy and AI used more in some less lethal areas, like logistics, predictive logistics, analyzing information, collecting and looking at sort of just vast amounts of data that no human can really make sense of, and helping to create a more efficient process on the support side. But really what the US at least is aiming for is all domain operations, or joint all domain command and control, which is sort of like the mega AI that is helping to connect, or helping to sort of be the battlefield commander for all sensors and shooters, coming up with the right pairing at the right time and dynamically managing it, collecting and analyzing the information, choosing targets, and then at least recommending courses of action to a human, if not acting on them themselves. And that seems like pretty far off. But I do think the one sort of factor that's pushing against that, and that is going to be the thing that the two factors that make autonomy come to fruition soon are the private sector, where there are incentives, and that's where most of the development is happening, and they actually have a better digital infrastructure and cloud computing and all of the stuff that the Pentagon doesn't. But the other thing is manpower limitations. And this has become clear with the war in Ukraine. Both sides have faced problems. You can go back to World War II, and it's the death of pilots, trained pilots, that really impacted the course of certain conflicts. So when you're short on manpower, it's much better to throw up something that doesn't have a person in it and to risk that loss than to risk individual's life. On electronic warfare, I don't know. I mean, this is one area that, from my perspective at least, the United States is pretty far behind. They've underinvested in it relative to, say, Russia. But it is one of those areas that's a really fast-moving, dynamic competition, and it's hard to determine who would have a long-standing advantage, because it can shift pretty quickly.
Thank you, Stacy. But before that, I ask both of the panelists, Stacy and Jürgen, the reason that we invite you is to contribute to the development of Defense Innovation 4.0 of South Korea. So because you come from the advanced countries, at least you're the technological trier in defense field is more advanced than that in South Korea. Based on your experience, later I will ask what's the some lessons that you can recommend them to South Korea when we try to accomplish Defense Innovation 4.0. Okay, Director General Ma.
Please, where you have
I do believe that collaboration with the private sector, I would like to talk about this issue on the policy level. So for AI unmanned robotics, the technology for these capabilities are well developed in the private sector. In advanced military states, I do believe that your technology is probably more sophisticated than what we have in Korea. We are benchmarking the US, and you talked about how you are horrified, and so that really did catch me off guard. At the Ministry of National Defense, we are working to introduce technologies from the private sector into the military through a few mechanisms. First, through selection and concentration, we wish to select strategic technologies so that we can foster these technologies. Furthermore, we also would like to work with DAPA and benchmark your projects to introduce technologies from the private sector to the military. That's what we would like to benchmark in Korea. I do believe that R&D governance is very important, and so the Ministry of National Defense is also focusing on cross-governmental governance. The Minister of National Defense can host the Science and Technology Committee, and through this consultative body, we wish to set the environment to introduce science and technology across the military. Well, Dr. Chung also gave us a lot of advice, and in the end, budget is a very important issue. And so, at the Ministry of National Defense, we wish to increase the current 4 trillion won budget to a significant amount in the future. If we are backed up by sufficient budget, then we hope that this will open the way for us to introduce technologies from the private sector into the military. In introducing technologies from the private sector, I do believe that we need to improve the processes for enhancing capabilities. Everybody talked about a lot of examples. I can completely agree with your statements. In particular, science and technology is changing on a daily basis. And so procurement has to be diversified, and we also need to have more agile systems. And all of these factors are the fundamental parts of National Defense Innovation 4.0. So this is all related to legislation and budgetary issues. And so we have to keep all of this into consideration for National Defense Innovation 4.0. We need to rehaul the R&D system, and based on this overhaul, we do hope that we will be able to establish new concepts for military capabilities, as well as reorganize the armed forces for National Defense Innovation 4.0. We have listened to the changes in the science and technology trends, and we have listened to the examples of Europe and the US, as well as the suggestions by Dr. Chung, and I do believe that all of this dialogue will greatly contribute to our innovations. Thank you.
Yeah, very quickly. First of all, you don't have the problem that you have, to find agreement between 27 member states. But what I can say is what he just pointed out, the close cooperation between the private sector and the military sector. And sometimes even the military sector is in the forefront of developing capabilities the private sector can take advantage on, but also vice versa. And this is very crucial, and this, I think, works very well in Europe. This interlink, this cooperation between the military and the private sector. This is very important. Take the example of artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence has a lot of benefits for the private life to make life easier, but also very, very important, in the military domain. This I can recommend to you, this cooperation between the military and the private sector. It should be mutual. Sometimes the private sector is more in the forefront, sometimes the military sector. But I must say this works between the European member states quite well.
I would just, Kevin.
네, 앞서도 말씀을 드린 것처럼 저희의 조달 과정을 따라 하신다면 정말 끔찍할 수도 있을 것 같습니다. 왜냐하면 훨씬 더 잘하실 수 있을 것이라고 생각되기 때문입니다. 미국의 국방부는 굉장한 관료주의적인 조직입니다. 그래서 죽음의 계곡이다라는 이야기도 나옵니다. 국방부가 결국은 실리콘밸리의 민간 기술을 활용하지 못하는 이유가 무엇인가? 거기에서 소프트웨어와 관련된 엄청난 기술들이 있는데 활용하지 못하는 것을 볼 수가 있습니다. 이와 관련해서 CNAS에서도 프로젝트를 진행하고 있고요. 사실 전반적으로 봤을 때 혁신의 성공 스토리가 너무나도 부족한 상황입니다. 소규모의 프로젝트들 중에 성공한 경우도 있지만 대규모로 확산이 되기 어렵고 직접 전장터에 영향을 줄 수 있는 성공 사례들이 너무나도 부족한 상황입니다. 국방부에서는 여전히 클라우드 컴퓨팅 시스템 무엇을 사용할지를 아직까지도 결정하지 못했습니다. 너무나도 오래 걸리고 있습니다. 미국의 여러 가지 문제점들이 분명히 있습니다. 그럼에도 불구하고 혁신도 이루어지고 있고요. 예를 들어서 마이크 브라운 님께서 함께했던 혁신도 상당히 성공을 했고 또 혁신과 관련된 프로젝트도 많이 진행을 하고 있습니다. 물론 다 성공한 것은 아니지만 여러 가지 노력이 이루어지고 있고요. 또 보편적으로 생각을 해봤을 때 개개인에 대한 인센티브 구조와 또 문화가 중요하다라고 생각합니다. 의사결정을 하는 사람들, 또 임원들, 그리고 고위급 관료들, 현장 의사결정자들의 인센티브와 문화가 중요하고 개개인이 실제 리스크를 감당하면서 혁신을 추구하고 새로운 것을 추구하는 것에 대한 인센티브가 분명히 필요합니다. 만약에 인센티브를 주지 않는다면 커리어가 걱정돼서 결정하지 못할 수 있기 때문입니다. 지금 6시 12분입니다. 본 세션은 20분에 마무리하도록 부탁을 받았습니다. 8분 정도가 남았는데요. 그러면 지금부터 질의응답을 받도록 하겠습니다. 손을 들어주시고 이름과 소속을 말씀하신 이후에 어느 분께 질문을 하시는지도 밝혀주시기 바랍니다.
Yes.
My name is Don Kirk. I'm a journalist. I'd like to ask Ms. Pettyjohn. She said that North Korean missiles were with increasing accuracy. I wonder how she knows this. She must have some source. We must be able to judge the accuracy of all these missile tests. Is that true? And then the next question is, well, if they're so accurate, could they very easily zero in on Camp Humphreys and Osan while missing all the civilian populations, which she indicated was possible? And whether she thinks this is really likely. Is this a danger that we should recognize? Thank you.
I just read open source analysts, 38 North, different folks at CSIS, people like that who follow these issues closely. I think North Korean missiles are certainly less sophisticated than China's or the United States. They're still far behind, but we're seeing dramatic improvements. These are not the Musadong and Nodong missiles of the past, where it was lucky if they were going to, not detonate and explode in the air, not actually make it to their target. And it does seem like Kim Jong-un, that they're developing a warfighting strategy that might be relying on these missiles to deliver nuclear weapons in a warfighting capacity. We've read the reports about forces being potentially securing this responsibility along the DMZ. And then when you look at the development of cruise missiles and the short-range ballistic missiles of various types, it does look like the intent is to be able to use those, or at least threaten to use those in that capacity.
Okay, any questions?
네, 저는 서울경제신문의 민병.
I am Min Byung-kwon of Seoul Daily. I have two questions. First question is to Director General Ma. You talked about National Defense Innovation 4.0, and one of the main goals for that is to supplement the decrease in manpower for the military forecasted for the future. And so if you try to make everything autonomous, that could be possible, but realistically, it cannot happen overnight. So if we take a look at the next 5 years or the next 10 years, what area would be the focus of autonomous operations so that you can compensate for the shortage of manpower? My second question goes to Director LA as well as Dr. Patty's John. And so within collective security, what is the most important is definitely the joint operations by the allies. And so we need to not only put in line the operations, but we also need to align the weapons as well. For example, we have the NATO standards for guns, but what about AI and software? Do we have standards to align AI and software already? If we are to use AI and autonomous system for the future warfares, so do we have actual standards on the NATO level, or do we have standards on the EU level or between allies? Are there any standards for AI or software or ROC to be used for military purposes? And have these standards been discussed with Korea?
첫 번째 질문하신 내용에 대해서 답변을.
I would like to answer the first question first. In the 2040s, we expect that there will be a large shortage of manpower due to the decrease in population. So that is why we have come up with the National Defense Innovation 4.0. So through this, we have come up with countermeasures for the decrease in population by utilizing hybrid systems, using both manned and unmanned systems. That will be the core. Of course, by utilizing manned and unmanned systems, we still need to verify how much manpower we can save, and we are in that process currently. Currently, the roadmap has not been detailed yet, or it hasn't been refined yet, but up until 2023 to 2024, we hope to establish a remote system. And for phase 2, we hope to have half autonomous systems by the year 2027. By saying half autonomous, for example, it could be unmanned surveillance vehicles. That could be a part of the half autonomous system. And then from 2028 onwards, we could have autonomous manned and unmanned hybrid systems. And in that process, we will need to collect various data, and we believe that we can establish this data system or data collection by starting our systems from 2023 and onwards.
Stacy?
Collective security, do we have standards? No, we don't on AI right now. I don't think anyone knows what those standards are, and that's part of the problem, is developing and understanding how you actually develop trust and what the standards should be and how you keep them up to date when the technology changes so quickly and needs to be updated regularly and is fairly opaque. So yes, I agree that there should be movement towards collective standards. That would make a lot of sense. There's a long road, I think, to go there.
Yeah, and very quickly, we have quite an intense cooperation between NATO and the European Union. We have joint declarations between the two organizations, and there are 74 projects. And so interoperability and standards, it's of course also, a project where both organizations work together, but I completely agree to Stanley that the standards are very hard to define and to get, taking into account how quickly technology is developing. And I just also want to mention to you that this cooperation between NATO and European Union, I mean, it's very important. 23 member states of the European Union are members of NATO as well. So with Sweden and Finland as two new member states, it's 23. And so we cooperate and we try to cooperate from the European Union point of view. We try to cooperate very closely with NATO. And the new strategic concept NATO has just agreed in Madrid also, points out a strong cooperation with the European Union. Thank you.
Okay, I'm not going to wrap up the session because the steps behind sending a desperate signal to me, please end the session. So just to give the big applause to all the panelists and participants. Thank you for all.
Thank you for responding to our desperate cry for closing our session. So thank you very much. Once again, please give another big round of applause. Thank you. This concludes our special session number 3, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for the intriguing discussions and your insights. I would like to inform you that our plenary session 3 will resume tomorrow morning at 9:30 a.m. at the Crystal Ballroom. We hope to see you there bright and early. Once again, if you have not filled out the survey, we ask you to kindly do so and to submit it at the second floor at the registration desk. And please do leave the interpretation receivers on the tables. Well, enjoy the evening, and I will see you tomorrow morning. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.